It was a little past midnight when I first stepped into the control room of the Grandview Industrial Complex. The air inside was cold, unnaturally cold, and the hum of machinery from the lower floors seemed to crawl up through the vents, vibrating softly beneath my boots. My name's Ethan Clark. I had just taken up a night security job after weeks of unemployment. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. And after all, what could go wrong in an empty factory that had been closed for years? The old man at the gate, the previous guard, had handed me the keys without meeting my eyes. "You just make sure you don't nap on the job," he'd muttered, his tone uneasy. I laughed it off, but there was something about the way his hands trembled when he passed me the flashlight, like he couldn't wait to be done with the place. The control room sat at the top of a narrow metal staircase. As I climbed, every step creaked like bones under pressure. When I pushed open the door, I was greeted by a dozen flickering monitors, their greenish glow painting the walls with ghostly light. Most cameras were pointed at empty hallways, dusty, silent, forgotten. But a few showed the lower storage areas where old crates and rusted conveyor belts still stood. I took my seat, sipped stale coffee from a thermos, and began my first round of monitoring. Everything looked boring. Exactly how a night shift should be. Until 12:47 a.m. One of the monitors, camera 9, covering the east corridor, flickered once, then twice, before settling into static. I frowned, tapping the screen. Nothing. I leaned back, muttering, "Probably a loose wire." That's when the sound came. A faint clink, like metal brushing against metal. It echoed through the hallway outside the control room, close but not close enough to locate. I turned down the volume of the security radio and listened. Silence. Then another sound, heavier this time. Thud. Drag. Thud. Drag. Footsteps. The factory was supposed to be empty. No workers, no maintenance crew, no one. I grabbed the flashlight, pushed the door open, and peered down the stairwell. The beam sliced through the darkness. Dust particles floated like ghostly snow. No one. Still, the noise persisted, now echoing faintly from the corridor below. I descended carefully, one step at a time, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the hum of machines. When I reached the ground floor, the sound stopped. The corridor stretched ahead, long, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. I swept my light across the floor. Nothing but old oil stains and scuff marks. But as I turned to head back, I froze. There, on the far wall, was a shadow. Not mine. Not from any object I could see. It was tall. Too tall. Its outline jagged, like it was breathing. For a second, it tilted its head, as if watching me. The air grew heavy. I blinked, and it was gone. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, every instinct screaming to leave. But I forced a shaky laugh. "You're just tired, Ethan," I whispered. "First night nerves." I returned to the control room, locking the door behind me. On the monitor feed, Camera 9 flickered back to life for a brief moment, showing that same corridor, empty, except for a handprint, dark and smeared on the wall where the shadow had been. My throat went dry. I leaned closer to the screen. Then the power surged. All monitors blinked. And for half a second, I saw a shape standing behind my chair in the reflection of the glass. I turned instantly, swinging the flashlight. Nothing. Just the humming machines, the whisper of old air ducts, and my own shallow breathing. It was the first night of many, but that was the moment I realized something was watching me. I didn't sleep that morning. Even after my shift ended and I stepped out into the pale dawn, the image of that handprint burned behind my eyes. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe grease on the wall or some trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. There's a difference between what you see and what you feel. And that night, I felt watched. When I returned for my second shift, I noticed the air around the factory felt different, heavier somehow, like the building itself was holding its breath. I clocked in, passed through the empty hallways, and reached the control room. The faint, metallic smell still lingered there, like rust mixed with something sweeter, almost like old blood. I shook it off and powered up the monitors. For the first few hours, everything seemed fine. The same dusty corridors, the same silent machinery frozen in time, until the lights on the east wing began to flicker again. The same corridor where the shadow had appeared. I checked the control board. No power surge, no blown fuses. But as I watched, the feed on Camera 9 started glitching, jumping frames, distorting shapes, turning dark silhouettes into something almost alive. At one point, the image showed what looked like a tall figure standing by the old breaker box. Then a flash. Static. Gone. I grabbed my flashlight again, against every sane instinct, and made my way down. The hallway stretched out like a black tunnel. The flickering light bulb overhead buzzed faintly, its glow pulsing like a dying heartbeat. "Probably just the wiring," I muttered, more to fill the silence than anything. The silence answered back, with a low, vibrating hum that didn't come from any machine I knew. The breaker box was near the loading bay. When I reached it, I noticed the panel door was wide open. Inside, half the switches were turned off, though I hadn't touched them. And right in the center, scratched into the metal with something sharp, were two words: "Stay awake." I stumbled back, flashlight trembling in my grip. Someone was playing games with me. They had to be. Maybe some kid sneaked in. Maybe the old guard was messing with the new guy. But when I turned around, the corridor behind me looked wrong. The light wasn't flickering anymore. It was steady, too steady. And halfway down the hall, just beyond the glow, was that shadow again. It wasn't cast on the wall this time. It was standing in the middle of the corridor. I froze. My throat went dry. The figure was motionless, tall, almost human, but not quite. Its outline rippled, like smoke trapped in the shape of a man. "Who's there?" I called out. No answer, but I could hear it now. A faint breathing, slow, wet. It was coming closer. I took a step back, then another. The flashlight flickered as if something was draining its battery. Then the lights overhead burst, one by one. Pop. 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 Glass rained down, and the corridor plunged into darkness. I ran. I didn't even look back. I sprinted through the hallway, boots echoing off the concrete, until I slammed the control room door shut behind me. My chest heaved, heart pounding like a drum. The monitors were still flickering with static. Every camera showed the same thing, except camera 4. Camera 4 showed me, sitting in the control room, but I wasn't alone. Behind my reflection, a second shape stood in the corner, still, silent, its face blurred into nothingness. Then, the power died. The entire building sank into pitch black silence, and in that silence, I heard it, right behind me, whispering words I'll never forget. Stay awake. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember running until I saw the sunrise again, my lungs burning, my mind refusing to understand what had happened. That was the night I realized something about this factory. It didn't just stand empty. It was waiting. I didn't go back to work for 3 nights after that. I told myself I was just exhausted, that what I saw wasn't real, just hallucinations from lack of sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, standing in the corridor, silent, patient, like it knew I'd come back eventually. On the 4th night, the company's supervisor, a man named Miller, called. "Ethan," he said, "we noticed several hours of missing footage from your shift. Cameras 4 through 9 went offline. We need you to come in tonight and help us review what happened." I wanted to say no, but I needed the job. So against every fiber of fear in my body, I agreed. When I arrived, Miller was already there. A middle-aged man with thick glasses and the look of someone who lived off caffeine and deadlines. He didn't notice how pale I was, or maybe he didn't care. "Everything's probably just a system glitch," he said casually, waving toward the monitors. "You'll see. These old systems love to screw with us." We sat in the control room, the monitors humming softly. Miller loaded the backup footage onto the main screen. The timestamp flickered. 12:45 a.m., the night of the malfunction. For the first few minutes, it was just normal. Quiet corridors, the faint flicker of lights. Then we reached the part where the cameras started going out. Static rippled across the screen, and for a moment, I felt that same icy sensation crawl up my spine. Miller leaned forward, adjusting the playback speed. "Wait, what's that?" he asked. The footage stabilized just long enough to show me walking toward the breaker box. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, and then, behind me, something moved. A shape. It rose from the corner, darker than the shadows around it, and began following at a slow, unnatural pace. Miller frowned. "Is that someone else in there with you?" I didn't answer. My voice wouldn't work. We watched as my recorded self reached the breaker box, staring at the scratched words, "Stay awake." And then something happened. The image distorted, stretched, like the air itself was bending. The shadow, that same tall, jagged silhouette, stepped closer until it filled half the frame. Its head tilted toward the camera. Then the feed went black. Miller sat back, exhaling. "All right. That's just probably a light glitch. Maybe interference." But his voice shook. He rewound the footage, slowed it down, and this time we saw it clearly. The shadow didn't just move, it turned. For half a second, as the distortion hit, its face came into view. Not a human face, just darkness. Two deep voids where eyes should have been, and a grin, wide, wrong, stretching too far across what could only be described as a mask of smoke. The room felt colder. Miller's hand hovered over the pause button. "Jesus, what is that?" he whispered. Before I could answer, the monitors flickered. All 12 feeds blinked, and for an instant, that face appeared across every single screen. Not on the footage, on the live feed. Miller stumbled back from the console. This isn't playback." Every camera was showing it. That figure standing in every corridor, hallway, and stairwell at once, watching. Then, as suddenly as it came, everything cut to black. Silence. Only the faint hum of the server remained. Miller turned to me, eyes wide. "We're shutting this down." Now he grabbed his phone, dialing frantically. But there was no signal. The lines were dead. I stared at the dark screens, my breath fogging the glass. Slowly, one of the monitors flickered back to life. Camera 1, facing the control room door. The door was closed on the screen, but in the live room, I heard it creak. Creak. Both of us turned toward the sound. The metal door shifted an inch, then another, as if something heavy leaned against it from the other side. Then came the whisper, low, breathy, almost curious. "Stay awake." Miller dropped the phone. I didn't move. I couldn't, because the last thing I saw before the monitors died again was a reflection of two shadows standing inside the room. One was mine. The other wasn't. I didn't go back for a week after that night. The company said Miller quit the next morning, didn't even collect his pay. They sent someone to pick up his things, but apparently He'd left his phone, his keys, even his jacket hanging on the back of the chair. It was like he just walked away and never came back. I wanted to do the same. But part of me needed to know, needed to see if it was real, or if the fear had finally driven me insane. So I agreed to take one last shift. It was a Friday night when I walked back through the gates of Grandview Industrial. The security lights flickered weakly, the air thick with mist. Every footstep echoed against the empty walls, sounding louder than I remembered. The building felt alive now, the kind of alive that watches and waits. Inside the control room, the smell hit me first. Not dust, not oil, but something decayed, like wet metal and burnt wires. I switched on the monitors. One by one, the screens blinked awake, their static glow washing over the walls. All clear, every corridor empty, except camera 4. The feed was dark, but not off. The darkness looked thick, like something pressed against the lens from the other side. I took a breath and sat down. Just the camera, I told myself. It's just broken. But the moment I said that, the door behind me clicked shut, on its own. The sound made my blood run cold. I turned slowly, flashlight in hand. Nothing. The door was closed, the bolt locked. I hadn't touched it. The air grew colder. My breath started to fog. The hum of the monitors deepened into a low vibration, as if something was crawling through the wires. Then came the whisper, soft at first, like static leaking from the speakers, then clearer. Words formed, familiar ones. Stay awake. I stood up, staring at the speakers. The voice was coming from every camera feed at once. "Who's there?" I shouted, though my voice cracked in the middle. "What do you want from me?" For a few seconds, nothing. Then the monitors began switching on and off in random sequence. Flashes of hallways, stairwells, storage rooms, and in every one of them, that same figure, still, watching. Closer each time the camera changed. Finally, the last monitor, the one facing the control room door, flickered on, and there it was. The shadow stood right outside. I could see its form perfectly now. A tall, skeletal silhouette, limbs too long, its head cocked to one side as if curious. The air around the monitor shimmered. The glass seemed to breathe. Then the lights went out. The room plunged into pitch-black silence. I couldn't even hear the hum anymore. Just my own pulse, hammering in my ears. The flashlight wouldn't turn on. I smacked it against my hand, but it was dead. And then, knock, knock. 2 soft taps on the control room door. I froze. The handle began to turn slowly. Metal squealed. I backed away, my hand finding the edge of the console behind me. The door opened halfway, but nothing stepped in. Just darkness. Then the monitors flared back to life, all 12 of them at once. Every camera now showed the same room, the control room. But not as it was. It looked wrong, warped. The walls seemed to stretch and breathe. The chair where I stood moments ago was occupied by me. I was sitting there, motionless, staring straight into the camera, eyes black and hollow. I stumbled back, horrified, but the reflection on the central monitor didn't move. It just smiled. That impossible, wide, inhuman smile. The lights flickered again, and I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned, and there it was. The shadow stood inches away, its face shifting like smoke, its body flickering like bad signal. It leaned closer, its voice no longer a whisper, but a vibration that crawled inside my skull. You stayed awake. Everything went white. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The factory was silent. The monitors were off, and I was sitting in the chair, exactly where the figure had been. My watch said it was 6 a.m. I don't remember sleeping. I don't remember dreaming. But when I stood and looked at the screens, every camera was still recording. And in each one, standing behind me, was that same dark silhouette, frozen, waiting. I left that place before the sun was fully up. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear it whisper. Through the hum of my refrigerator, through the static of my old TV. Stay awake.